What if I told you that your empty garden bed, the one you're planning to fill with tomatoes again this year, could be worth 10 times more with a single decision you make this season? Not by farming more acres, not by buying expensive equipment, just by planting something different, something that sells for $40, $60, even $200 per pound at farmers' markets. Something that chefs are begging for, that herbalists are scrambling to source locally, that health-conscious customers will drive 40 minutes to buy from you directly. Most farmers, experienced, hard-working, smart farmers, have never grown these plants. Not because they're difficult, not because they're risky, simply because nobody told them these plants exist, let alone what they're worth. Today, I'm changing that. I'm going to walk you through 20 plants that are dramatically underrepresented in American agriculture. Plants with established demand, premium pricing, and markets that are wide open for small and mid-sized growers who move first. Because number 3 on this list produces flowers so electrically strange that chefs call them the plant that shocks your mouth, and a single plant can yield enough to sell at $50 an ounce at any farm stand. And number 19 has been used in Ayurvedic medicine for 3,000 years. But it's now one of the fastest growing crops in the American supplement industry, and almost nobody is growing it domestically. And number 1? It's the most expensive spice on earth, and you can grow a full pound of it on a plot the size of a parking space. Subscribe before we dive in. If you grow food, sell food, or are thinking about starting, hit that subscribe button right now. We post new videos every week with the kind of information that took us years to piece together, so you don't have to. Now, let's get into it. Number 1. Saffron, the most expensive crop per acre on earth. Crocus sativus, $500 to $2,000 per pound, dried. Let's start with the one that stops people cold when they hear the price. Saffron, the dried stigmas of Crocus sativus, sells for anywhere between $500 and $2,000 per pound. That's not a typo. And while the saffron crocus is historically associated with Iran and Spain, it grows beautifully in USDA zones 6 through 9, meaning a huge portion of the United States is perfectly suitable. Here's what makes saffron remarkable as a small farm crop. The math is unlike anything else in agriculture. 1 acre of saffron, planted properly, can produce between 2 and 4 pounds of dried saffron per year. At even the low end of the market, $500 a pound, that's $1,000 to $2,000 per acre, from a crop that requires no irrigation once established and minimal inputs. The harvest window is narrow, October to November, roughly 2 to 3 weeks. But the labor investment is front-loaded on planting and then concentrated in that short harvest. The corms multiply year after year, meaning your planting cost drops every season as you divide and expand. The market? It's everywhere. Specialty food stores, online direct-to-consumer, restaurants that take locally grown saffron seriously, and they do. The Persian restaurant 2 towns over can't get local saffron at any price because nobody's growing it within 300 miles. Saffron got overlooked in American agriculture because it's associated with exotic, faraway places. But geography was never the barrier. It was simply the assumption that someone else would grow it. Think of it as the crop hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone willing to look past the stereotype. Number 2, wasabi, the freshest money you'll ever make. Eutrema japonicum, $70 to $150 per pound, fresh rhizome. Almost all the wasabi you've ever eaten in a restaurant wasn't wasabi. It was dyed horseradish. Real wasabi, Eutrema japonicum, is so perishable, so difficult to transport, and so labor-intensive to grow at scale that the authentic product almost never reaches restaurants outside of Japan. Which means the domestic market for real, fresh wasabi rhizome is genuinely undersupplied. Prices for fresh rhizome run from $70 to $150 per pound at wholesale, and direct-to-restaurant sales regularly exceed that. Here's the agricultural reality. Wasabi wants cool temperatures, shade, and constant moisture, the conditions you'd find along a mountain stream. This makes it unsuitable for industrial production, but perfect for small-scale growers with the right microclimate, a shaded greenhouse setup, or a cool stream-adjacent corner of their property. Growing time is the challenge. Wasabi takes 18 to 24 months to reach harvestable size. This is not a quick crop, but once your operation is rolling, with staggered plantings, you're harvesting continuously, and the per-pound return dwarfs almost anything else you can grow. The story of wasabi is the story of authentic versus industrial. Every high-end Japanese restaurant in your region is currently serving fake wasabi. You can change that. And once a chef tastes the real thing, bright, complex, fading in seconds rather than burning for minutes, they will not go back. Think of it as the crop that turns local into a competitive advantage nobody else can replicate. Number 3, Szechuan button, the flower that electrifies your mouth, Acmella oleracea. $30 to $60 per ounce fresh. If you want to hand a chef something and watch their eyes go wide, hand them a Szechuan button. Acmella oleracea, also called the toothache plant or electric daisy, produces small yellow and red flowers that, when chewed, trigger a cascade of sensations unlike any other food on earth. A tingling that builds into a mild electric buzz, followed by increased salivation, followed by a numbing warmth that fades over about 60 seconds. The active compound is spilenthol, and it's completely unique in the culinary world. Modernist chefs have been obsessed with Szechuan buttons for a decade. They're used as garnishes, in cocktail rims, in avant-garde tasting menus, in gourmet chocolates. A single flower sells for more than most vegetables sell per pound. From a growing perspective, this is one of the easiest plants on this entire list. Acmella oleracea is a fast-growing annual that thrives in full sun, tolerates heat, and produces prolifically from midsummer through first frost. You can grow it in containers, in garden rows, in raised beds, anywhere you'd grow marigolds essentially, because it looks similar and has similar cultural requirements. The market challenge is finding it. Most chefs don't know this plant exists. That means your job as a grower is half agriculture, half education. But once you've introduced one chef to Szechuan buttons, they tell 2 others. Word travels fast in kitchens when something is this unusual. Think of it as the plant that sells itself, because nothing else does what it does. And once people experience it, they have to have it again. Number 4, epazote, the Mexican herb that American farmers are completely ignoring, Dysphania ambrosioides. $15 to $30 per pound dried. Here's a plant that gets used in tens of millions of kitchens across Latin America every single week, and is almost entirely absent from American commercial agriculture. Epazote, Dysphania ambrosioides, is the herb that goes into authentic black beans, quesadillas, tamales, and mole. It has a sharp, piney, almost petroleum-like flavor that sounds unappealing until you taste it in context. And then you understand why cooks in Mexico and Central America treat it as non-negotiable. There is no substitute for it. When it's missing from a dish, people who grew up with it notice immediately. Now think about who lives in the United States. Over 60 million people of Latin American heritage. A Mexican restaurant on virtually every block in every mid-sized city in the country. And almost all the epazote they use is either grown in Mexico or substituted entirely because fresh domestic supply doesn't exist. This is a market failure that you can step into. From a growing standpoint, epazote is almost comically easy. It's a fast-growing annual, or a perennial in frost-free zones, that grows so readily it's considered a weed in parts of the American Southwest. It seeds itself, tolerates poor soil, needs minimal water once established, and produces prolifically from late spring through frost. You can sow it directly. You can grow it in containers. You can intercrop it with almost anything. The market is concentrated and easy to identify. Latin grocery stores, Mexican and Central American restaurants, farmers markets in areas with large Latin American communities. Walk in, introduce yourself, bring a sample. The conversation will be short because the product sells itself. These buyers have been trying to source fresh, local epizode for years, and either giving up or paying for imported dried herb that doesn't compare. Epizode disappeared from American farm catalogs because mainstream agricultural distributors don't know it exists. It never entered the commodity system, which means it never got priced down to nothing. Think of it as the herb that's been hiding in the blind spot of American agriculture. Enormous demand, zero domestic competition, and one of the easiest plants you will ever grow. Number 5. Black cumin. 2 markets in 1 plant. Nigella sativa, $20 to $45 per pound. $60 to $100 per pound, cold-pressed oil. Most people who see Nigella sativa growing think it's just a pretty garden flower. The delicate blue blossoms, the feathery foliage. It looks ornamental. And it is ornamental. But that's the least interesting thing about it. The seeds of Nigella sativa, variously called black cumin, black seed, kalonji, or haba al-baraka, have been used in Middle Eastern, South Asian, and North African cooking for thousands of years. They go into naan bread, spice blends, pickles, and cheeses. They're essential in Bengali 5-spice, in Egyptian dukkha, in countless dishes that are now being cooked in American homes by a growing immigrant population that cannot reliably find quality domestic black cumin anywhere. That's the culinary market. But then there's the second market, and it's bigger. Black seed oil has become one of the most commercially significant products in the natural health industry. The active compound, thymoquinone, has been studied extensively for anti-inflammatory and immune-supporting properties. The supplement market for black seed oil is growing at double digits year over year, and the cold-pressed oil commands prices that make the seed alone look modest, $60 to $100 per pound for quality product. Here's the agricultural story. Nigella sativa is a cool season annual that performs best in spring and fall in most of the United States. It tolerates a light frost. It prefers well-drained soil and full sun. It matures in about 90 days from direct seeding and produces seed pods that are easy to harvest and thresh. For small growers, this is a crop with minimal infrastructure requirements. The cut flower market is a third revenue stream that most growers never even consider. The inflated seed pods of Nigella, both fresh and dried, are beloved by florists for dried arrangements and are sold at premium prices at wholesale. Nigella got overlooked in American agriculture because it serves niche ethnic markets that mainstream distributors ignored. But niche ethnic markets are no longer niche when your nearest city has 100,000 South Asian residents. Think of it as the 3 revenue stream crop that most people walk past in the garden and think is just a flower. Number 6, Tamarillo, the tree tomato, that chefs can't find. Locally, Solanum betaceum, $4 to $8 per fruit retail, $15 to $25 per pound wholesale. If you handed most American chefs a tamarillo and asked them to identify it, they'd probably say it looks like a small, egg-shaped tomato. They'd be roughly right about the family. It's a Solanum, same genus as the tomato, but completely wrong about the flavor. Tamarillo, Solanum betaceum, tastes like a tomato that went to culinary school. It's intensely savory and simultaneously tart, with a deep, complex fruitiness that sits somewhere between a tomato, a passion fruit, and a tamarind. The red-fleshed varieties lean savory. The yellow ones lean sweet. Both are extraordinary. Chefs who encounter them for the first time tend to become immediately obsessed because the flavor profile opens up applications that regular tomatoes simply can't provide in salsas, sauces, cocktails, chutneys, and desserts. The plant is a fast-growing subtropical tree that reaches fruit-bearing stage in 18 months to 2 years. In USDA zones 9 and 10, it grows outdoors as a perennial. In cooler zones, it does beautifully in large containers that can overwinter in a greenhouse or even a bright garage. It's not a difficult plant. It just needs protection from frost and fairly consistent moisture. The market for tamarillo in the United States is genuinely wide open. It appears occasionally in specialty grocery stores at $4 to $8 per fruit. At farmers' markets in cities with any culinary sophistication, it generates genuine excitement because most buyers have never seen one. Restaurants that do farm-to-table sourcing will take every fruit you can grow. Tamarillo never entered mainstream American agriculture because it requires tropical or near-tropical conditions that industrial growers in commodity regions don't have. But small growers with greenhouses or growers in Florida, Southern California, Hawaii, or the Gulf Coast have conditions that are perfect. Think of it as the tomato's more sophisticated cousin that's been waiting for someone to introduce it to the American market properly. Number 7. Vietnamese coriander, the cilantro that stays fresh when it's hot. Persicaria odorata, $15 to $30 per pound. Fresh. Every cilantro grower knows the problem. The moment temperatures hit the high 80s, cilantro bolts. It goes to seed overnight. The leaves turn bitter. The harvest window slams shut, and you're scrambling to replant. For summer farmers' markets, the most profitable time to be selling herbs, cilantro is essentially unavailable from your own field. Vietnamese coriander solves that problem completely. Persicaria odorata, also called rau ram or laksa leaf, has a flavor remarkably similar to cilantro. Herbal, bright, slightly citrusy. But it is a tropical perennial that thrives in heat and humidity. The hotter it gets, the better it grows. While your cilantro is bolting in July, your Vietnamese coriander is putting out leaf after leaf after leaf. The culinary demand is substantial. It's essential in Vietnamese pio and bun bo hue. It goes into Malaysian laksa. It's used throughout Southeast Asian cuisines that are increasingly mainstream in American cities. And because it looks and tastes similar enough to cilantro that non-specialist cooks can use it as a substitute, the market extends beyond the Southeast Asian restaurant niche into anyone who wants fresh herb in summer. Culturally, Vietnamese coriander is already well known in communities with Vietnamese, Malaysian, Indonesian, and Filipino heritage, which means the demand exists, the buyers know the product, and they're currently getting it from ethnic grocery importers rather than from local growers. Growing it is straightforward in zones 9 and above, where it's a true perennial. In colder zones, it's grown as an annual or overwintered in containers. It roots easily from cuttings in water, which means once you have one plant, you can expand your planting for essentially nothing. Vietnamese coriander got overlooked by American farmers because mainstream herb buyers, the distributors, the chain grocery buyers, don't have it on their approved vendor lists. But chefs don't buy through chain grocery distributors. They buy from farmers they trust. Think of it as the heat-proof cilantro that the summer farmers market has been waiting for. Number 8. Hyssop, the ancient herb, with a modern craft spirits market. Hyssopus officinalis, $20 to $35 per pound. Dried, $8 to $15 per bunch. Fresh, hyssop is one of those plants that has been in European herb gardens for 1,000 years. Mentioned in the Bible, used by medieval apothecaries, essential in the original recipe for chartreuse liqueur, and yet almost completely absent from American commercial herb production. Hyssopus officinalis is a hardy perennial shrub in the mint family, native to the Mediterranean and Central Asia. It produces spikes of small purple, blue, or white flowers from midsummer through fall. The leaves and flowers have an intensely aromatic flavor, minty, slightly bitter, with camphor notes and a piney depth that dried herb simply cannot replicate at the same intensity as fresh. The culinary uses are diverse. It goes into braised meats, particularly lamb and game. It works in vinaigrettes and marinades. It pairs extraordinarily well with stone fruits, peaches, apricots, plums, which makes it a natural for pastry applications that adventurous bakers and pastry chefs seek out. But the market that's growing fastest for hyssop right now is craft spirits. The craft distillery and craft cocktail bar industry has been systematically working through the classic European digestive recipes, the bitters, the amari, the herbal liqueurs, and nearly all of those recipes call for hyssop. Distillers who want to make something authentic can barely find domestically grown fresh hyssop at any price. As a farm crop, hyssop is remarkably low maintenance. It's drought-tolerant once established, cold-hardy to Zone 3, and it blooms prolifically for years from a single planting. It's also an exceptional pollinator plant. The bees work it intensely, which provides a documented benefit to surrounding crops. Hyssop disappeared from American farms when the European herb tradition that used it faded from cooking and medicine. But that tradition is coming back through craft spirits, through farm-to-table cooking, through a culinary culture increasingly interested in what older recipes actually tasted like. Think of it as the herb that's been waiting 800 years for American agriculture to catch up with European bartenders. Number 9. Lemon verbena, the fragrance that sells itself at farmers' markets. Aloesia citrodora, $10 to $20 per bunch. Fresh, $40 to $70 per pound, dried. There is a simple test you can run at any farmer's market. Set out a bundle of lemon verbena and watch what happens when people walk past it. They stop. They reach out and crush a leaf between their fingers without being asked. And then they inhale, and their face changes. The scent of Aloesia citrodora, intensely, purely lemony in a way that actual lemons are not, is one of the most immediately appealing things in the plant world. That moment, the reach, the crush, the inhale is a sale. And unlike most herbs, lemon verbena sells to people who've never cooked with it before, because the scent alone is enough to make them want it. Culinary uses are broad and accessible. Lemon verbena goes into teas, which is how most people first encounter it. But it also makes extraordinary infused simple syrups for cocktails and lemonade. It pairs beautifully with fish and chicken. Pastry chefs use it in custards, panna cottas, and sorbets. The flavor is cleaner and less acidic than lemongrass, without the grassy bitterness of lemon balm, which makes it the most versatile of the lemon-flavored herbs and the one serious cooks prefer. The dried herb market adds another revenue layer. Lemon verbena dries with minimal flavor loss, which is unusual. Most herbs are significantly inferior dried. This means you can harvest heavily when the plant is at peak and dry the surplus for off-season sales. In zones 8 and warmer, lemon verbena is a perennial that can grow into a substantial woody shrub over several years. In colder zones, it's grown as an annual or kept in large containers that come inside for winter. It's a fast grower in warm weather and responds well to hard harvesting. Cutting it back actually encourages bushier, more productive regrowth. Lemon verbena never established itself in American commercial herb production because it doesn't ship well fresh, and it's not a standard grocery item that distributors know how to move. But at a farmer's market, where people buy with their noses, it's one of the most powerful selling herbs you can grow. Think of it as the plant that does your marketing for you. One crushed leaf, and the sale is made. Number 10. Chervil, the forgotten French herb that Michelin kitchens still use, Anthriscus cerefolium. $25 to $45 per pound. Fresh, in the canon of French cuisine, chervil is one of the four fines herbs alongside parsley, tarragon, and chives. It goes into béarnaise sauce. It's the herb in classic French omelettes. It finishes bisques, cream soups, and delicate fish preparations. Every trained French or classically trained American chef knows exactly what chervil is and exactly how to use it. And almost none of them can get it fresh from a local grower. Anthriscus cerefolium looks like a finer, lacier version of flat-leaf parsley, with a flavor that is softer, more anise-forward, and more complex. Parsley meets tarragon, with a delicacy that disappears entirely when the herb is dried or cooked too long. This is crucial for the market. Chervil must be sold fresh. The dried product is essentially worthless culinarily, which means every chef who wants to use it properly is dependent on fresh supply. And that supply, in most American cities, simply doesn't exist. From a grower's perspective, chervil is a cool season annual. It bolts in heat, which means it's a spring and fall crop in most climates, or a year-round crop with greenhouse protection. This is actually a market advantage. The seasons when chervil is available are exactly the seasons when classically trained chefs are most interested in elegant, delicate preparations. The short growing season means quick turnover. Chervil goes from seed to harvest in as little as 6 to 8 weeks. You can succession plant it densely in small spaces and harvest multiple times per planting. It doesn't require rich soil, excessive water, or intensive care. The market is narrow in the best possible sense. Fine dining restaurants, French bistros, culinary school kitchens, caterers doing upscale events. These buyers pay premium prices without negotiation because the ingredient simply isn't available elsewhere. Think of it as the herb that disappeared from American farms the moment French cuisine stopped being taught in most culinary programs. And that's coming back as chefs rediscover the classics. Number 11. Calamint, the wild herb that craft distillers are hunting for Clinopodium. Nepeta, $15 to $35 per pound. Dried, $60 to $90 per pound for distillation. Calamint is a plant most American growers have never heard of, but it's been used in Mediterranean herbal medicine and cooking for centuries. Clinopodium nepeta, also sold as Calamintha nepeta or lesser calamint, is a small perennial herb in the mint family, with small white or pale lilac flowers and leaves that smell like a cross between mint and oregano, with a slight camphor edge that makes it uniquely arresting. In Italian cooking, where it's known as mentuccia or nepetella, calamint goes into mushroom dishes, artichoke preparations, and braised meats with a frequency that suggests it's not optional. It's foundational. The flavor profile is impossible to replicate with the herbs most American growers sell, which is exactly why Italian-trained chefs and serious home cooks interested in regional Italian cuisine seek it out specifically. But the market that puts calamint firmly into the premium category is craft distillation and botanical extraction. The essential oil of calamint, high in pelargone and other terpenes, is used in flavoring formulations for liqueurs, specialty spirits, and functional beverage ingredients. craft distillers who are building botanical complexity into their products are actively seeking unusual aromatic herbs that the mainstream herb trade doesn't carry. Calamint is exactly that kind of ingredient. As a farm plant, calamint is almost absurdly easy to grow. It's a drought-tolerant perennial, hardy to Zone 5, that thrives in poor, well-drained soils where more demanding herbs would struggle. It spreads slowly by root, but doesn't become invasive. It flowers prolifically, making it attractive to pollinators, and it can be mown back after flowering to encourage fresh, leafy growth for harvest. Calamint was never developed commercially in the United States because the Italian-American cooking tradition that used it operated informally. People brought seeds from their home regions, grew it in backyard gardens, and shared it within communities rather than buying it commercially. That informal supply chain can't scale to meet a craft distillery's needs. Think of it as the herb that Italian grandmothers knew about, and that American craft distillers are only now discovering they desperately need. Number 12. Oca, the Andean tuber that has zero competition in American agriculture. Oxalis tuberosa. $8 to $15 per pound at farm stands. If you want to sell something at a farmer's market that nobody else has, OCA is your plant. Oxalis tuberosa is the second most important root crop in the Andean region of South America after the potato. It has been cultivated for thousands of years at altitude in Peru, Bolivia, and Ecuador. The tubers come in colors that would stop any farmer's market browser in their tracks: vivid red, orange, yellow, white, and pink, often with streaked or speckled patterns. They look like someone crossed a fingerling potato with a jewel. The flavor is where oca really distinguishes itself. Fresh dug oca has a pleasant acidity from oxalic acid. It tastes slightly tangy and bright, almost lemony, especially in yellow varieties. When left in sunlight for a few days after harvest, the starch converts to sugar and the acidity mellows, producing tubers that are sweet, nutty, and complex. They can be eaten raw, roasted, boiled, or dried. The texture is somewhere between a waxy potato and a water chestnut. In terms of growing requirements, OCA is a long-season crop. It needs about 5 to 6 months of frost-free growing and prefers cool nights and mild days, making it ideal for high-altitude regions, the Pacific Northwest, and parts of New England. It doesn't tolerate extreme heat. But in the right climate, it's a low-input crop that produces abundantly without intensive soil preparation. The market reality is simple. OCA is not at any farmer's market in your region. It is not at any grocery store. There are no domestic commercial growers to compete with. You have a completely open field, literally and figuratively. The story writes itself. An ancient Andean vegetable, grown locally, tasting unlike anything in American produce. Every food writer, every chef interested in heritage crops, every CSA customer who wants something genuinely new will respond to that story. Oca never entered American agriculture because the potato industry occupied the same mental category, tuber crop, and nobody looked further. Think of it as the potato's more interesting South American cousin that's been waiting 500 years to be introduced to American tables. Number 13. Ground cherries, the self-marketing crop that sells out before you get home. Physalis pruinosa, $6 to $12 per pint at farm stands, $4 to $8 per pound. Wholesale, ground cherries have a secret weapon that almost no other crop has: the husk. Physalis pruinosa produces small, golden berries, about the size of a marble, each wrapped in a papery, lantern-shaped husk. The husk is not edible, but it is irresistible. People pick them up and peel them open the moment they see them. And what they find inside is a fruit that tastes like a vanilla pineapple tomato hybrid. Sweet, tropical, slightly savory in the best possible way. It's a flavor that has no real comparison in American produce, and the reaction is almost always immediate delight. At farmers' markets, ground cherries move faster than almost anything on the table because curiosity sells them. People who have never tasted one buy a pint because the package is fascinating. People who have tasted one come back every week until season ends. The repeat customer rate is exceptional because the flavor is genuinely unique and the crop is only available for a short window. From a production standpoint, ground cherries are a warm season annual related to tomatillos. They're started indoors like tomatoes, transplanted after last frost, and produced prolifically from midsummer through frost. They are significantly more drought-tolerant than tomatoes and less susceptible to disease. They drop to the ground when ripe, which is where the name comes from, meaning you can harvest by picking up from the ground rather than hand-selecting from the plant. The husk keeps the fruit in excellent condition for 1 to 3 weeks at room temperature, which is a remarkable shelf life for fresh produce and makes direct-to-consumer sales easy. Excess production can be made into jam, salsa, or pies, value-added products that extend the season and increase revenue per pound, grown. Ground cherries exist in heirloom seed catalogs and home gardens, but commercial production is essentially non-existent. Think of it as the crop that markets itself through curiosity. Every pint sold at a farmer's market is also a 10-minute conversation about what it is, where you can buy more, and when you'll be back next week. Number 14. Sorrel, the perennial that French chefs can't find and you can grow forever. Rumex acetosa, $20 to $40 per pound. Fresh sorrel is one of those ingredients where if you've eaten it in a French restaurant, in a classic sorrel soup, a sorrel sauce on salmon, a sorrel cream with eggs, you remember it clearly. The flavor is vivid and unusual, intensely lemony, bright, almost electric on the palate, from a high concentration of oxalic acid in the leaves. It tastes like no other herb or green, and it functions in cooking in a way that nothing else replicates. It simultaneously brightens and thickens sauces as it melts into liquid, making it genuinely irreplaceable for the applications it's designed for. And you essentially cannot buy it fresh in the United States, outside of a handful of specialty markets in major cities. Rumex acetosa is a cool season perennial that, once established, comes back year after year with almost no intervention. You plant it once, properly, and it produces harvests for a decade or more. The leaves emerge early in spring, before most other greens, making it one of the first fresh crops available each season. It continues producing through summer in cooler climates and picks back up in fall as temperatures drop. The market is not enormous, but it is reliable and premium. French-trained chefs will pay top dollar for fresh sorrel because they can't get it any other way. The dried product is worthless, and the frozen product loses the bright acidity that makes sorrel special. Farm-to-table restaurants, French and New American bistros, and serious home cooks who have encountered sorrel in recipes and never been able to find it form a small but deeply motivated buyer base. The perennial nature is the economic differentiator. Most crops require replanting, retilling, and reinvestment every year. Sorrel, once established in good soil with reasonable drainage, simply exists and produces. Year 3 of a sorrel planting, the input cost per pound harvested is nearly zero. Sorrel vanished from American farm production when French-style cooking retreated from mainstream American kitchens in the 1980s. It never came back commercially, even as the cooking came back. Think of it as the perennial that pays for itself in year 1 and then produces profit indefinitely, the agricultural equivalent of buying rather than renting. Number 15. Borage, the edible flower, that cocktail bars will pay anything for Borrego officinalis, $30 to $70 per ounce for individual flowers, $8 to $15 per bunch with flowers. There is a visual arms race happening in the craft cocktail industry, and edible flowers are one of the primary weapons. Bartenders at upscale cocktail bars and hotel bars across the country are paying extraordinary prices for a single perfect flower to float in a gin and tonic, rest in the bowl of a coupe, or be frozen into an ice cube for a dramatic tableside presentation. Borage produces exactly the flower those bartenders are looking for. Borrego officinalis grows to about 2 feet tall, with striking, slightly fuzzy blue-gray foliage, and it produces dozens of small, intensely blue, star-shaped flowers continuously from early summer until frost. Each flower is perfect, symmetrical, a vivid true blue, which is actually rare in edible flowers, making borage especially valuable. The flowers taste mildly of cucumber, which is mild enough to not interfere with any cocktail recipe, and actually complementary to gin-based drinks. The math on selling individual borage flowers is extraordinary. A single plant, well grown, produces hundreds of flowers per season. A single flower sold to a craft cocktail bar or fine dining restaurant might sell for 50 cents to $1. One productive borage plant can generate $20 to $40 over a season, from a plant that cost you a seed packet and about 30 minutes of work. At a larger scale, borage can be sold as fresh-cut bundles with flowers attached, as microgreens, or as a companion plant in farm packages sold to chefs who want to garnish their own dishes. The young leaves are also edible, with the same cucumber flavor, and can be used in salads and as wraps. From a growing standpoint, borage is essentially a weed in the best possible sense. It self-seeds aggressively once established. It tolerates poor soil. It grows fast from direct seeding. It's drought-tolerant at maturity. The only management it requires is harvesting, which you want to do regularly anyway, to encourage continuous flower production. Borage never became a commercial crop because individual flowers can't be harvested mechanically and can't be shipped at scale. But for a small grower selling direct to restaurants and bars, which requires no shipping, just a cooler and a weekly delivery route, these constraints don't apply. Think of it as the plant that grows like a weed and sells like a luxury product, bridging the gap between zero input and extraordinary return. Number 16. Sea buckthorn, the functional food berry that nobody is growing in America. Hippophae rhamnoides, $15 to $35 per pound. Fresh berries, $60 to $120 per liter oil. Sea buckthorn is not a new discovery. It has been used in traditional Chinese medicine, Tibetan medicine, and Russian folk medicine for centuries. Soviet athletes consumed it during the 1970s and 80s as a performance supplement. It's been used in European skincare formulations for decades, and it contains one of the most extraordinary nutritional profiles of any temperate fruit on Earth. Hippophae rhamnoides berries are bright orange, small, and intensely sour, almost unpleasant eaten fresh, which is part of why they haven't broken into mainstream fruit markets. But as a juice, a supplement ingredient, or a skincare oil, the intensity is precisely the point. The berries contain 12 to 15 times the vitamin C of oranges. The oil pressed from the seeds and pulp is exceptionally high in omega-7 fatty acids, which are rare in plant sources and have been studied for skin health, mucosal lining health, and metabolic function. The functional food and nutraceutical market for sea buckthorn products is growing rapidly in the United States, driven by the same consumer trends pushing every other superfood ingredient. The problem, and the opportunity, is that essentially all of the sea buckthorn sold in American markets is imported from China, Canada, or Europe. Domestic production barely exists. The plant itself is a hardy shrub that handles cold with extraordinary resilience, to Zone 3 in some varieties. It tolerates poor, dry soils. It fixes nitrogen, improving the ground around it. It's thorny, which makes harvesting labor-intensive at scale. But at small farm scale, this is manageable. It produces from year 3 or 4 after planting and increases production for decades. The berries can be sold fresh to processors, juiced and bottled as a value-added product, or used as an ingredient in high-end jam and chutney production. The oil extracted from the pulp is the highest value product, but requires processing equipment. The market entry point for small growers is fresh or frozen berries sold to natural food manufacturers and supplement producers who are actively looking for domestic supply they can market as American-grown. Sea buckthorn got overlooked in American agriculture because the commercial varieties were developed in Europe and Asia, and the distribution infrastructure for the finished products was built around imported supply. Changing that supply chain is a business opportunity, not just a farming opportunity. Think of it as the nutritional powerhouse that grew up in Russia and Tibet and is only now being discovered by American consumers. And American growers who move first will own that domestic market. Number 17. Woad, the ancient blue dye crop. Finding a new market in artisan textiles. Asatis tinctoria, $20 to $45 per pound. Dried leaf, $80 to $150 per pound. Processed pigment. This one is for the growers who are willing to think in a slightly different direction, because woad is not a food crop, and that's exactly what makes it interesting. Asatis tinctoria, the woad plant, was the primary source of blue dye in Europe for thousands of years, used to color everything from Viking cloaks to medieval manuscripts to the working clothes of peasants across the continent. It was so economically important that entire regional economies in England, France, and Germany were built around its cultivation and processing. And then indigo from India arrived in the 16th century, and woad disappeared from European agriculture within a generation. But woad never disappeared from the plant's potential. And today, with the growth of the artisan natural dye movement, the handcraft textile industry, and the sustainability-focused fashion sector, demand for woad as a natural blue dye source is genuinely reviving. Natural dyers, a community that is small but dedicated and growing, have almost no domestic source for woad pigment or dried leaves. They import from specialty suppliers in England and France, pay premium prices, and complain regularly that they can't find American-grown product. The plant itself is a biennial. It flowers in its second year, and it produces extremely high yields of leafy biomass in its first year, which is when the dye concentration in the leaves is highest. It is cold hardy, tolerates poor soils, and has almost no pest pressure because very few insects want to eat it. From a growing standpoint, it's straightforward. The market for woad is niche, but premium and completely unsupplied domestically. Processed woad pigment, the concentrated blue powder extracted from fermented leaves, sells for $80 to $150 per pound to natural dyers. Dried leaves sell at lower prices for home dyers who process their own. This is a crop for growers who enjoy having a product that is genuinely unusual, who want a market with zero domestic competition, and who are comfortable building a customer base in the artisan crafts community rather than the restaurant or grocery world. Think of it as the crop that built medieval empires and is quietly rebuilding itself in the hands of 21st century textile artists who are tired of synthetic dyes. Number 18. Rue, the companion, herb that supplement makers can't source. Locally, Ruta grevalens, $15 to $30 per pound. Dried, $40 to $80 per pound for specialist markets. Rue has a reputation problem. And that reputation is completely undeserved from a commercial growing perspective. Ruta graveolens, common rue, is one of the oldest cultivated herbs in the world. It has been grown in Mediterranean gardens since ancient Rome, used in traditional medicine across Europe and the Middle East, and it appears in Shakespeare, in classical poetry, in folk traditions, as a protective and medicinal herb. The dried herb has a strong, bitter, complex aroma, medicinal in the best sense, distinctive and unmistakable. The bitterness that makes rue unpleasant to eat in quantity is exactly what makes it commercially valuable in two specific markets. The first is traditional herbal medicine and folk remedy traditions. In Latin American communities, particularly among people with Mexican, Puerto Rican, and Central American heritage, rue is a standard household herb used in spiritual and medicinal practices. Bundles of fresh rue are sold at botanica shops and ethnic markets. The domestic supply of fresh-cut rue is thin, and growers who can supply these markets consistently find loyal customers who return regularly. The second market is natural pesticide formulation. Rue contains compounds that are effective insect deterrents. This is actually the origin of its use as a companion plant in traditional European kitchen gardens, where it was planted near brassicas to deter cabbage moths and near roses to deter aphids. The natural pest control industry, which is growing as organic farming scales up, uses rue extract as an ingredient in botanical pesticide formulations. This market is less relationship intensive and more volume focused than the retail herb market. Rue grows as a hardy perennial shrub to zone 4, tolerates drought, prefers well-drained soil and full sun, and essentially thrives on neglect once established. The only real consideration is that the plant's sap is photosensitizing. It can cause skin irritation in sunlight, meaning gloves are standard equipment for harvesting. This is a minor inconvenience that has no effect on the plant's commercial value. Rue was never developed as a commercial herb crop in the United States because its primary markets are ethnic specialty and traditional medicine communities that mainstream agricultural distributors don't understand or supply. Think of it as the herb that's been in human hands for 2,000 years, still in active daily use in millions of American households, and still waiting for a farmer who grows it to call those households neighborhood stores and introduce themselves. Number 19. Ashwagandha, the adaptogen that American farmers are sleeping on, Withania somnifera, $25 to $60 per pound, dried root. The global adaptogen market was valued at over $9 billion in 2023, and the single most sought-after adaptogen in that market, the one that anchors more supplement formulas, stress relief products, and sleep aids than any other, is ashwagandha. Withania somnifera has been used in Ayurvedic medicine for 3,000 years, primarily as a root that supports the body's ability to manage stress. Modern clinical research has validated many of those traditional uses. Studies show meaningful effects on cortisol levels, sleep quality, and anxiety. The supplement industry doesn't just want it. They're desperate for reliable domestic supply. Here's the agricultural reality. Ashwagandha is a drought-tolerant, warm-season perennial that performs beautifully in the same conditions as many row crops. It prefers dry, well-drained soil and full sun. Does not like to be overwatered. It essentially wants the conditions that commercial agriculture struggles with: thin, dry soils that tomatoes and corn would hate. The roots are harvested in autumn, dried and processed. Wholesale prices for quality dried root run from $25 to $60 per pound, with organic and domestically grown product commanding premiums that imported powder simply cannot match. The market trend is unmistakable. American consumers are increasingly skeptical of supplement ingredients sourced from overseas with no verifiable quality chain. Grown in the USA on an ashwagandha supplement is worth real money to brands and consumers alike. Ashwagandha got ignored by American farmers because the supplement industry's domestic sourcing infrastructure barely exists. But that's changing. And the growers who establish themselves now will have the relationships, the certifications, and the track record when the big buyers come looking. Think of it as the crop that the supplement industry is waiting for someone local to grow. Number 20. Szechuan pepper, the numbness that commands premium prices. Xanthoxylum simulans / Zed, Piperidum, $40 to $90 per pound. Dried. We're saving the best, or at least the most profitable, for last. Szechuan pepper is not actually a pepper at all. Xanthoxylum species, depending on variety, either Chinese or Japanese, produce small husks that contain a compound called hydroxy-alpha-sanshul. And that compound does something no other spice on earth does. It creates a specific numbing, tingling, electric sensation called ma in Chinese cuisine. It is chemically irreplaceable. There is no substitute. If a chef wants to make authentic mapo tofu or Szechuan dry-fried beef, they need this spice. Dried Szechuan pepper sells for $40 to $90 per pound at specialty retail. The demand from restaurants cooking any form of Szechuan, Japanese, or modern fusion cuisine is steady and growing. American chefs discovered the ingredient about 15 years ago, and it has held its place in serious kitchens ever since. The plant itself, Xanthoxylum simulans, or Z. piperidum, is a hardy deciduous shrub or small tree that tolerates cold, zones 5 to 9 depending on variety, grows on poor soils, and requires minimal maintenance once established. It produces berries in its second or third year and increases production annually for decades. This is a long-game crop. Not a quick annual you plant and harvest this year. But it's the kind of long game that builds real, defensible, ongoing income. Because once your Xanthoxylum trees are producing, they produce every year. The trees don't care if the economy softens. They don't care if commodity prices crash. They just keep making berries that sell for $70 a pound. Think of it as the tree you plant today, so that in 3 years, you have something nobody else near you is selling. And you have it every single autumn, indefinitely. Outro / call to action. If you made it this far, you now know something that most farmers, even experienced, successful farmers, don't. The most profitable land isn't necessarily more land. It's the same land, planted with something most of your neighbors have never considered. The plants on this list share one thing. They serve markets where demand is established, supply is thin, and the customers, whether they're chefs, herbalists, supplement companies, or farmers market shoppers, are actively looking for a local grower they can trust. You don't need hundreds of acres for these crops. You don't need to quit your day job tomorrow. You start with one plant that fits your climate, your infrastructure, and your market. You learn it, you master it, and then you expand. The window is open. These are not secret crops that will stay obscure forever. Awareness is growing. But the growers who establish themselves now, build relationships now, get certified now, those are the growers who will own these markets in 5 years. That's the opportunity. It's sitting in your soil right now, waiting for you to plant it. If this video gave you something to think about, hit that like button. It genuinely helps other growers find this content. Drop a comment below. Which plant on this list are you most tempted to try? Are you team culinary herbs, team adaptogens, or team premium spices? I read every single comment. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this is the kind of content we make every week. Real information, real numbers, real growing advice. Hit subscribe and ring that bell. I'll see you in the next one.